December of 1941, when the United States was attacked by Japan at Pearl Harbor, the United States was drawn into a war they really were not prepared to fight. The United States, at that time, was really not even closely prepared to fight a war against the professional armies of Germany and Japan. At that time, the United States had a standing army of 174,000 men, just 174,000 men. It was still wearing the leggings and the tin hats that they wore during World War I. The guns that they were using were manufactured in 1903. They had 40-year-old guns that they were using, and believe it or not, the U.S. government still owned tens of thousands of horses for the cavalry. So our army was not prepared to fight World War II, or what became known as World War II. And so for the United States to be able to go up against Germany and Japan and win that war, they had to have their armies increased. The problem, the reason why the United States Army was unprepared was what it was lacking. It needed better armament, it needed better training, and it needed a greater force. It needed millions more soldiers, which it got. Well, the same is not true for us in our battle against evil and sin. The reason the United States Army was unprepared was because of what it lacked. But the reason why you are unprepared for the war that you have against sin and evil and the different things that are facing you in your life is not what you lack, but rather what you are still carrying in your life. What you have yet to surrender, what you have yet to get rid of, what's causing you difficulty and making you inept is what you're holding on to from your former life, your life before Christ. To kind of give you an illustration of this, think of the battle that David had with Goliath. Goliath was the Philistine giant, which was opposing the people of God and was causing fear in all of the Israelites. Remember that? And as you remember, they were trying to find somebody who could be capable of going and defeating Goliath. Well, when David offered his services, the people around him, their idea was, well, what we need to do for David is to give him what he's lacking. We need to prepare David. And so what the people attempted to do for David was to make him a better soldier. They sought to train him. They sought to give him armor. Do you remember that? They were going to give him that big armor, Saul's armor. They also sought to give him some cunning. They wanted him to have some strategy because they did not believe that David, as he was, that little shepherd boy, was going to be capable of defeating Goliath. Well, David, of course, saw it differently. And what he saw when he looked at the able-bodied soldiers who were much bigger than him, much stronger than him, and much more adept in the ways of war than he was, being professional soldiers themselves, what he saw was what they had that they needed to get rid of. Because what he saw in the people, the soldiers around him, from Saul on down, was that they had fear in their lives. And that fear was keeping them from attacking Goliath. They also saw that they had a slavish dependence on human might and power, which was also keeping them back. And they also had this crippling self-consciousness about their inability and how little they thought of themselves. David said, I am not afraid of anything because I serve the Almighty. He also said, it's not my might or my strength that fells giants, but rather it is the power and might of God and His Spirit. And he was not self-conscious about who he was at all, because he didn't care who he was. He saw himself as an instrument in the hands of Almighty God. It was not him who was going to strike the blow, but God through him. And so you see that the people around him, the people who failed, who should have already dispatched with Goliath, had failed to do so, not because they were lacking in strength or power or the proper armor or the proper weapon. The reason why they were failing is because they had all this stuff in their hearts and minds that was keeping them from being effective. And so what I want to do for you today, and I'm not certain what it is that you're battling with today. I don't know what sin or oppression or evil or difficulty or trial you're facing. But I want you, perhaps, through this account with Miriam, is to identify some things that I think you need to be rid of. These are things which are common to all of us in our human experience. And I'm going to call them pebbles in the shoe today. And if you're walking down a path, if you're walking on a trail, and you get pebbles in your shoe, it's hard to keep walking, right? And if I get pebbles in my shoe and I'm on a hike, I look for a log or a tree stump or someplace I can sit down, take off my shoe, and remove the pebbles. So I want you to continue in your walk with God today, in your walk as a disciple of Jesus Christ. And I hope that to make that walk more comfortable and swift, and so that you can keep up, we're going to try to remove some of these pebbles. So the first 3 pebbles I'm going to have you remove today, or hopefully remove, are the pebbles of aspiration, entrenchment, and evasion. The first pebble, sounds funny saying that. Anyway, the first rock in your shoe is that of aspiration. So let's look again at verses 9 and 10. But before we read 9 and 10, for context's sake, let's read the first part of the chapter to let you know what preceded Miriam being stricken with leprosy. So let's look at chapter 12, and we'll read verses 1 to 10 here to give you the full scope of what's going on. And before I read this, Miriam and Aaron are Moses' siblings. Okay, Aaron is Moses' older brother, and I don't know if Miriam was an older or younger sister or not. Then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married. And incidentally, he had married her a long time before this incident took place. Okay, he married her right after he left Egypt, so this is something that's been stewing for a long time. Apparently, they never liked her. Anyway, because the Cushite woman whom he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. And they said, "Has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us as well?" And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very humble, more than any man who was on the face of the earth. And suddenly the Lord said to Moses and Aaron and to Miriam, "You 3 come out to the tent of meeting." So the 3 of them came out. Then the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the doorway of the tent. And he called Aaron and Miriam. And when they had both come forward, he said, "Hear now my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, shall make myself known to him in a vision. I shall speak with him in a dream. But not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my household, and with him I speak mouth to mouth, even openly and not in dark sayings, and he beholds the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant, against Moses?" And now our text. So the anger of the Lord burned against them, and he departed. But when the cloud had withdrawn from over the tent, behold, Miriam was leprous, as white as snow. As Aaron turned toward Miriam, behold, she was leprous. I'm going to focus here on Miriam because it's simpler for what I'm trying to accomplish today. The problem with Miriam ended up suffering, right? She ended up suffering leprosy, which is one of the worst skin diseases anybody could ever get. It's incredibly destructive to the chief organ of your body, your skin. And it's very contagious and it's lethal. Now this suffering that Miriam finds herself in here today, what is the cause of it? Well, the cause of her suffering is simple. She was not content with her station in life, right? She did not want to be a servant of God's under her brother. She wanted to have her brother's station in life. She wanted to be in the same position as Moses. She was not content to be Miriam, the sister of the leader of Israel. She wanted to be Miriam, the leader of Israel. And because she was discontented in her station in life, she found that she was in the same company with Satan. Because this discontentedness, this lack of freedom or love for the place that God puts you in the world, is the root cause of a lot of suffering. If you think of Satan, of course, who the Bible remarks as being the most beautiful of all of God's creation, and somebody who was worthy of a lot of awe, and everybody looked at Satan and said, "He is beautiful." And it bothered Satan that as beautiful as he was, that he couldn't get some of the glory for himself. He didn't want to be a mirror. He did not want to be a reflection for the glory that he was receiving being given back to God. He wanted to soak some of that up for himself. And because he was discontented in being an agent for God to be glorified, he said, "You know what? I'm going to leave heaven, get away from God so that I can take that glory and keep it for myself." It's the same thing that tripped up Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were not content to live in a beautiful garden with a beautiful occupation.